The morning rush at Bluefinch Café was like a song of chaos. Espresso machines hissing, chairs scraping, laughter tumbling through the air. The smell of cinnamon and burnt toast clung to the air. And behind the counter, Elara Quinn moved like someone who'd memorized the rhythm of struggle. She smiled at every customer, even when her hands trembled from exhaustion. The clock read 8:45 a.m. Her shift had started at 5. Outside, luxury cars glided past the cafe windows, reminders of a world Elara never belonged to. But she didn't mind. She had her reasons for staying here. Every cup she poured, every coin she counted, went toward her younger brother's tuition. That was her dream. Not diamonds, not status, just security, just family. Then came the moment that changed everything. Two small children burst through the cafe door, twin boys, no older than 6, wearing matching gray sweaters and the kind of shoes that cost more than Elara's rent. They were a whirlwind of giggles and confidence, dragging a confused chauffeur behind them. "Miss, one of them called, his voice high and bright. "Do you know where love lives?" The cafe went quiet. Elara blinked, halfway through wiping a table. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, what did you say?" The other twin climbed onto a stool, chin resting on his hands. "Daddy said love doesn't live anywhere," he pouted, "but we think he's wrong." Laughter rippled through the cafe. Even Elara couldn't help but smile. "Well," she said softly, crouching down to their level, "maybe love lives where people care for each other. Like family." The first twin's eyes sparkled. "Then you can be our mommy," he declared suddenly, and before anyone could react, he ran forward and hugged her leg. The cafe erupted in gasps and laughter. Elara's face turned scarlet as she stammered, Oh, sweetheart, I'm sure you're real mommy." "She's in heaven," said the other twin quietly. His little voice broke the air like glass. For a second, no one moved. Elara's throat tightened. She placed a gentle hand on the boy's hair. "Then she's watching 2 very brave little gentlemen," she whispered. That was when the door opened again. The laughter died instantly. A tall man in a charcoal suit stepped in. Sharp jawline, storm-gray eyes, presence heavy enough to hush the room. Cassian Drell, billionaire CEO of Drell Holdings, walked like someone the world made room for. The twins froze. Rowan, what did I say about running off?" The chauffeur began to apologize, but Cassian's eyes had already landed on Elara, the waitress still kneeling, one of his sons clutching her apron. Her eyes met his, and something unspoken passed between them. Curiosity, defiance, something electric neither understood yet. "Sir?" she began, her tone respectful but steady. "They were just looking for—" "I can see what they were looking for. Attention." He reached for his son's hands, but Rowan hid behind Elara's skirt. "She's nice," he mumbled. "She said love lives in families." Cassian's jaw flexed. His eyes softened for a half-heartbeat before the frost returned. "Apologize," he told them. The twins looked up at Elara with guilt in their eyes. "Sorry, miss." "It's all right," she whispered, smiling kindly. "Just be careful next time." As Cassian turned to leave, Elara noticed the faintest tremor in his hand, like a man carrying too many ghosts. And before the door closed, Rowan's small voice called after him, "Daddy, can we buy her? She smells like cookies." The cafe exploded into laughter again. Elara gasped, covering her mouth, but Cassian froze mid-step. Slowly, he turned, expression unreadable. Then quietly, almost to himself, he said, "Not everything can be bought." And with that, he left. But that night, as rain brushed the city and the twins dreamed of the woman who smelled like warmth and sugar, Cassian found himself staring at the ceiling, her smile haunting him like a melody he couldn't forget. And somewhere in the heart of the sleepless city, Elara whispered a wish to the stars. "Please, let tomorrow be kind." It would not be kind. It would be unforgettable. The next morning dawned golden and alive, the kind of morning that promised peace but delivered chaos. In the penthouse of the Drell estate, sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, spilling across marble floors and expensive silence. Cassian Drell sat at the breakfast table, scrolling through market reports, his face expressionless, his coffee untouched. Across from him, Ronan and Rowan exchanged a look, the secret kind only twins understood. Their nanny, Mrs. Hensley, placed a plate of pancakes before them, whispering, "Eat up, little gentleman." But they didn't move. Ronan's fork clinked against the plate. "Daddy?" Cassian didn't look up. Rowan leaned forward, chin on his hands. "Do you think love lives in people or places?" Cassian blinked. His thumb froze on the tablet. "Excuse me?" Ronan pushed his plate away. "Because Miss Cookie, the cafe lady, said love lives in families." For the first time in years, Cassian felt something like air catch in his throat. Miss Cookie. He tried to focus on his reports, but the sound of her voice from yesterday echoed faintly, gentle, sincere, unafraid. He cleared his throat. "Eat your breakfast." The twins exchanged another look. Operation Find Mommy had officially begun. After breakfast, when Cassian left for work, the boys got to work too. With crayons, sticky notes, and dangerous imagination, they made a plan. A list of steps that would even make their late mother proud. Rowan read it aloud with dramatic flair. "Step 1, find Miss Cookie. Step 2, Ronan added, make Daddy like Miss Cookie. Step 3, Rowan whispered, don't let Daddy ruin it." They nodded solemnly. Mission begins tomorrow. That same morning, miles away at Bluefinch Café, Elara tried to shake off the strange warmth the twins had left behind. She dreamed about them, two giggling little faces calling her Mommy, like it was the most natural thing in the world. She smiled at the memory, but her coworker Lonnie caught it instantly. "Oh no," Lonnie teased, wiping the counter beside her. "You've got that look. The one people get when something dangerous starts." Elara rolled her eyes. "They were just sweet kids." "Rich sweet kids," Lonnie corrected, smirking, "which means they come with rich problems." Elara laughed, but her chest tightened a little. She didn't belong anywhere near that kind of world, the kind where love was a contract and people like her were invisible. But fate wasn't asking her permission. 2 days later, the cafe bell jingled again. Elara looked up and froze. The twins stood there, grinning ear to ear, holding flowers that were clearly picked from someone's private garden. Behind them was their exhausted driver, muttering, "Your father is going to—" "Hi, Miss Cookie," Rowan waved wildly. "We brought you flowers." Elara gasped, then smiled, kneeling to their level. "You came all this way? That's so sweet. But your Daddy's in a meeting," Ronan said proudly, "and we came to invite you for lunch." Before Elara could answer, her manager appeared, frowning at the sight of 2 boys in designer shoes. "Miss Quinn, you know these children?" "Yes, sir," she said quickly, trying to keep the peace. "They're just—" "Her friends," Rowan interjected brightly, "and she's coming with us." Chaos followed. The boys tugged her apron, the driver pleaded for mercy, and Elara could only laugh helplessly. "I can't just leave." Then the cafe door opened again. Cassian stood there. The air changed. He was taller than she remembered, more severe, the kind of man whose presence silenced an entire room. His gray eyes swept the cafe, landing on the twins first, then on her. Ronan. His voice was calm but firm. "Outside, now." The twins froze, guilt written all over their faces. Elara stepped forward instinctively. "Sir, please, it's not their fault. They were just—" He turned to her, that same unreadable look from days ago returning. "I know exactly what they were doing." For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Cassian's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. "And I apologize for their behavior." Elara shook her head. "There's nothing to apologize for." Cassian's lips twitched, almost a smile, almost warmth. "Then perhaps I owe you lunch instead." The cafe went dead silent. Even the coffee machine hissed awkwardly. Elara blinked, flustered. I don't think that's—" But Rowan's whisper carried from behind his father's leg. "She said yes." Cassian's jaw tightened. "I don't recall—" "She said yes," Ronan confirmed. And just like that, the mighty Cassian Drell found himself outnumbered by 2 6-year-olds and 1 very stunned waitress. He exhaled slowly, defeat disguised as composure. "Then lunch it is." Elara smiled nervously, unsure if this was a dream or the beginning of her undoing. Outside, the twins high-fived, their plan already in motion. Because love, as they were about to prove, didn't need permission, only opportunity. The restaurant was the kind of place where silence cost money. Chandeliers hanging like frozen stars, waiters gliding like shadows, and every plate arranged as though it belonged in a museum. Elara had never been anywhere like it. Her heart raced as she followed Cassian Drell and the twins into the marble dining room. Her simple floral dress felt wildly out of place amid diamonds and suits. Rowan and Ronan bounced ahead, proud as princes, while Cassian walked behind them, composed, cold, untouchable. But every now and then, his eyes flicked toward Elara, quietly studying the woman who somehow tamed his son's wild hearts in a single afternoon. When the waiter approached with menus, Elara barely knew what to do. Cassian noticed her hesitation and took the menu from her hand gently. "I'll order for us," he said. Her voice trembled. "Oh, you don't have to." "I know," he replied simply, "but I want to." The twins giggled. "Daddy never wants to do anything with anyone." Cassian gave them a sharp look that could have frozen lava, but Elara smiled softly, and that smile melted something deep in him, something long buried. As lunch arrived, conversation began like a hesitant dance. The twins talked non-stop about their school, their secret missions, their love for pancakes, while Cassian mostly listened, occasionally correcting their table manners. Elara laughed more than she had in months. Her laughter filled the air, light and real, a sound Cassian hadn't heard in his home since before the accident. When the twins ran off to admire the dessert cart, Cassian leaned slightly closer. "You're very good with them," he said quietly. She blinked. "They're good kids." "Good," he repeated as though testing the word. "That's not what most people would call them." Elara tilted her head. "Maybe most people don't try to understand them." For a long moment, Cassian said nothing. The clinking of silverware around them faded into background noise. Then, unexpectedly, he asked, "Do you always work at that cafe?" "Yes," she said. "It's small, but it's home." He nodded slowly, eyes narrowing with thought. "You speak about it the way some people speak about dreams." Elara smiled faintly. "Dreams are expensive, Mr. Drell. Coffee's cheaper." That made him almost laugh. At the dessert cart, the twins were whispering. Ronan tugged Rowan's sleeve. "She's perfect," he said. "Daddy smiled. Did you see that?" Rowan nodded seriously. "We need to make him keep smiling." They watched as Cassian and Elara exchanged quiet glances over their tea. For the first time, their father didn't look lonely. He looked human. When lunch ended, Cassian stood, helping Elara with her chair. "Thank you for tolerating my son's boldness." Elara shook her head, smiling. They just want their dad to be happy. That made him pause. His jaw tightened slightly. Happiness isn't something I can schedule, she finished softly. No, but sometimes it just shows up anyway. For a moment, neither moved. The twins waited by the door, holding hands, watching them like silent matchmakers. Then Cassian's phone buzzed. The world returned. The CEO mask slipped back on. I have to take this, he said curtly, stepping aside. Elara turned to the twins, her heart warm and heavy at once. You two, she said softly, kneeling down, are dangerous little charmers. Rowan grinned. That means we're good at it. Ronan nodded, whispering, You'll come again, right?
Elara hesitated. Her world and theirs weren't meant to touch again. But when she looked into their hopeful eyes, something inside her answered before her mind could stop it. Yes, she said, I'll come again. Outside the restaurant, Cassian ended his call, watching Elara laugh with his sons. The sunlight caught her hair, turning it to gold. Her hands brushed against Rowan's, guiding him across the curb like she'd been doing it forever. Cassian's chest tightened with an unfamiliar ache, something dangerously close to yearning. He had spent years avoiding connections, building walls so high that nothing human could reach him. But now, this quiet woman, this waitress with dirt under her nails and kindness in her eyes, was walking straight through them, not breaking them down, just softening them. And that terrified him more than anything, because love, he realized, had never died in him. It had only been waiting for the right voice to call it back, and it had answered to hers.
The restaurant was the kind of place where silence cost money. Chandeliers hanging like frozen stars, waiters gliding like shadows, and every plate arranged as though it belonged in a museum. Elara had never been anywhere like it. Her heart raced as she followed Cassian Drell and the twins into the marble dining room. Her simple floral dress felt wildly out of place amid diamonds and suits. Rowan and Ronan bounced ahead, proud as princes, while Cassian walked behind them, composed, cold, untouchable. But every now and then, his eyes flicked toward Elara, quietly studying the woman who somehow tamed his sons' wild hearts in a single afternoon. When the waiter approached with menus, Elara barely knew what to do. Cassian noticed her hesitation and took the menu from her hand gently. "I'll order for us," he said. Her voice trembled. "Oh, you don't have to." "I know," he replied simply, "but I want to." The twins giggled. "Daddy never wants to do anything with anyone." Cassian gave them a sharp look that could have frozen lava, but Elara smiled softly, and that smile melted something deep in him, something long buried. As lunch arrived, conversation began like a hesitant dance. The twins talked non-stop about their school, their secret missions, their love for pancakes, while Cassian mostly listened, occasionally correcting their table manners. Elara laughed more than she had in months. Her laughter filled the air, light and real, a sound Cassian hadn't heard in his home since before the accident. When the twins ran off to admire the dessert cart, Cassian leaned slightly closer. "You're very good with them," he said quietly. She blinked. "They're good kids." "Good," he repeated as though testing the word. "That's not what most people would call them." Elara tilted her head. "Maybe most people don't try to understand them." For a long moment, Cassian said nothing. The clinking of silverware around them faded into background noise. Then, unexpectedly, he asked, "Do you always work at that cafe?" "Yes," she said. "It's small, but it's home." He nodded slowly, eyes narrowing with thought. "You speak about it the way some people speak about dreams." Elara smiled faintly. "Dreams are expensive, Mr. Drell. Coffee's cheaper." That made him almost laugh. At the dessert cart, the twins were whispering. Ronan tugged Rowan's sleeve. "She's perfect," he said. "Daddy smiled. Did you see that?" Rowan nodded seriously. "We need to make him keep smiling." They watched as Cassian and Elara exchanged quiet glances over their tea. For the first time, their father didn't look lonely. He looked human.
Elara hesitated. Her world and theirs weren't meant to touch again. But when she looked into their hopeful eyes, something inside her answered before her mind could stop it. "Yes," she said, "I'll come again." Outside the restaurant, Cassian ended his call, watching Elara laugh with his sons. The sunlight caught her hair, turning it to gold. Her hands brushed against Rowan's, guiding him across the curb like she'd been doing it forever. Cassian's chest tightened with an unfamiliar ache, something dangerously close to yearning. He had spent years avoiding connections, building walls so high that nothing human could reach him. But now, this quiet woman, this waitress with dirt under her nails and kindness in her eyes, was walking straight through them, not breaking them down, just softening them. And that terrified him more than anything, because love, he realized, had never died in him. It had only been waiting for the right voice to call it back, and it had answered to hers.
By Monday morning, the Drell Tower was humming with whispers. Assistants carried coffee and curiosity in equal measure. Executives leaned closer than usual during meetings, their voices lowered, their glances darting toward the top floor. Something had changed in the rhythm of Cassian Drell's world. The man who once ruled with silence was now smiling. And in a building powered by power itself, that was enough to start a storm. Cassian walked into the boardroom like he always did, tailored suit, composed stride, gaze sharp as a blade. But today, the air around him felt different. Softer, maybe. Less carved from stone. His assistant, Lyle, noticed it first. "Sir, you've received several calls from the press." "Ignore them," Cassian cut in. "Whatever they're chasing, they'll get bored." Lyle hesitated. "It's about a photo, sir." Cassian looked up. "What photo?" "The one taken yesterday outside your penthouse. You were walking with a woman and the twins." Cassian froze for the briefest second, then exhaled. "Elara." "Yes, sir," Lyle replied. "Social media is calling her your new fiancée." Cassian's jaw tightened. "She's an employee, a friend of my children." "Sir," Lyle said, lowering his voice, "with respect, the last time you were seen with anyone publicly was your late wife. This is news." Cassian leaned back, eyes narrowing. The press could feast on lies. That never mattered before. But this time, the thought of Elara's name dragged through tabloids made something burn inside him. Across the city, Elara stared at her cracked phone screen in disbelief. Her photo, laughing, holding Rowan's hand, was everywhere. Mysterious woman captures billionaire CEO's heart? Single mother or secret heiress? Meet the waitress who melted the Ice King. She scrolled, her hands trembling. She'd worked so hard to build a quiet life, and now, in one careless heartbeat, it was gone. When her phone rang, she didn't have to check the name. "Cassian?" she whispered. "Where are you?" His voice was calm, too calm. "I'm at the cafe. I didn't—" "I'm coming," he said, and hung up. 15 minutes later, Cassian Drell, the man who never set foot anywhere unplanned, walked straight into her cafe. Heads turned, spoons froze midair, whispers spread like wildfire. He approached the counter where she stood, pale and shaking. "You shouldn't have come here," she said softly. "Neither should you," he countered. "But here we are." By the next morning, every gossip blog, business column, and entertainment channel in the city had turned Elara Quinn into a national headline. Mystery waitress who stole the CEO's heart. $10 million twins nanny or billionaire's bride. The cafe where she worked, once peaceful, tucked away near a quiet street corner, now buzzed with reporters. Cameras flashed, customers whispered. Even her manager wouldn't meet her eyes when she walked in. "Elara," he said carefully, wringing his hands, "you're a good worker, but this is bad for business." Her heart sank. "You're firing me?" "I'm sorry," he whispered. "You didn't do anything wrong, but people don't come here for scandal." Elara stood frozen, apron still in her hand. In one cruel twist of fate, the job she'd fought to keep, the stability she'd finally found, was gone. Cassian Drell, meanwhile, sat in his office surrounded by chaos. His PR team spoke in frantic circles, damage control, image strategy, denials. But he wasn't listening. His gaze was locked on the tablet before him, a photo of Elara drenched in rain outside the cafe, her expression raw with exhaustion and fear. "Sir?" Lyle's voice broke the silence. "What do you want us to do?" Cassian stood slowly. "I want it all to stop." "That's impossible, sir," Lyle admitted. "Once the story's out, it spreads faster than truth." Cassian's tone dropped, dangerous and low. "Then find the source. Someone planted this." But deep down, Cassian already knew. His gut told him this wasn't random.
Someone wanted to destroy what little peace had begun to form around him, and they were using Elara to do it. That night, as storm clouds gathered over the Drell mansion, Elara arrived with her small suitcase and trembling hands. Cassian had sent a car, though she hadn't wanted to accept. When the butler opened the door, she froze in the vast marble foyer, a world of chandeliers, portraits, and silence so heavy it felt like judgment. Cassian descended the staircase, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't have come here," he said quietly. Her voice cracked. "You sent the car." He stopped a few feet away. "Because it's safer here. The press won't find you." Elara looked up at him, eyes burning. "I lost my job because of you." His jaw tightened. "Because of them," he corrected. "Because people can't stand what they don't understand." "Then tell me, Cassian, what am I supposed to be? Your employee, your scapegoat, or your story?"
For the first time, his voice faltered. "You're none of those things." The twins, hearing the argument, peeked from the hallway, wide-eyed and silent. Rowan tugged at his brother's sleeve. "Dad, he's sad again," he whispered. Cassian turned, softening instantly at the sight of them. He knelt, opening his arms, and both boys ran to him. Elara stood frozen, her anger crumbling under the tenderness of the moment. "Did we do something wrong?" little Arlo asked, voice trembling. Cassian shook his head. "Never," he said softly. "You two did everything right." Ilara's chest ached watching them. The man she'd thought untouchable, distant, cold, now looked heartbreakingly human. Later, when the twins were asleep, Elara found Cassian in his study, standing before a window streaked with rain. He didn't turn when she entered. "Do you regret helping me?" she asked quietly. He exhaled slowly. "I regret not protecting you sooner." For a long moment, neither spoke. The storm outside cracked with thunder, and the city lights shimmered on the glass. "I don't care about rumors," he said finally, turning to face her. "But I do care about what happens to you." Her breath caught. "Why?" He stepped closer, his voice a whisper, softer than she'd ever heard it. "Because somewhere between silence and chaos, you became the only thing that feels real. And in that stillness, with lightning slicing through the sky and their reflections trembling in the glass, Elara realized that the most dangerous thing in Cassian Drell's empire wasn't greed or ambition. It was a heart he'd spent years trying to bury. The next morning, the mansion felt eerily still, as though the storm outside had slipped in through the windows and taken root in every room. Cassian stood at the breakfast table, unreadable as ever, reading a newspaper headline that turned his blood cold. Elara Quinn, gold digger or guardian angel? The twins' 10 million nanny scandal grows. Beneath it was a blurry photo, Elara smiling faintly beside the twins as they sat on a park bench. Someone had followed them. Someone had been watching. Cassian crushed the paper in his hand. "Who leaked this?" he demanded. Lyle, standing near the door, hesitated. "We're tracing it, sir, but the first upload came from inside the company's servers." Cassian turned slowly. "Inside?" Lyle nodded. "And, sir, it came from your brother's account." Silence fell like a blade. Hours later, Cassian stormed into the boardroom of Drell Enterprises, where his younger brother, Damon, sat smugly at the head of the table, all charm and poison in an expensive suit. "You've gone too far this time," Cassian growled. Damon smirked, flipping through a file. "Far? I'd say I'm saving the family from another embarrassment. You're parading around with some café girl while the board panics over your image."
Cassian slammed his hand on the table. "Her name is Elara."
Yes, Damon sneered. The same Elara who's now the face of every gossip blog from here to New York. Tell me, brother, are you going to marry her next, or just let her ruin you like father ruined himself chasing a fantasy? The mention of their father twisted something deep in Cassian's chest, old wounds that never healed. "You know nothing about love," he said coldly. "You only know greed." "And you," Damon shot back, standing, "only know how to lose control." For a moment, neither moved. Two men bound by blood, broken by pride. The storm outside raged harder, as if echoing their fury. Elara, meanwhile, sat in the nursery with Rowan and Arlo, trying to keep her hands from shaking as she read them a story. The twins' laughter was her only anchor, small, fragile proof that some good still existed in this world. But when she looked up, she saw Evelina, Cassian's mother, standing in the doorway. Elegant, imposing, her presence filled the room like cold wind. "Mrs. Drell," Elara said quickly, standing, "I was just—" Evelina raised her hand. "Sit, child. I know who you are." Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp. "I had you checked the moment you stepped into this house. You have no record of wrongdoing, no family of influence, no secrets. Or so I thought." Elara's heart thudded. "I don't understand." Evelina stepped closer. "Your mother, Helena Quinn, she once worked for my late husband as his assistant until she disappeared without a word. Do you really expect me to believe it's a coincidence that you ended up here?" Elara's mouth dried. "I didn't know." The older woman studied her face for a long, chilling moment, then turned away. "Whether you knew it or not doesn't matter. What matters is my son. He's already been destroyed by love once. I won't watch it happen again." That night, Cassian returned home to find Elara standing on the balcony, her hair wild in the wind. She turned when he approached, her eyes glassy with tears she refused to shed. "Your mother thinks I'm here on purpose, that I planned all this." Cassian's expression softened. "You didn't." "How do you know?" He took a step closer. "Because you're the only one who doesn't want anything from me." The words broke something inside her. "Then why does it feel like I'm losing everything?" Cassian hesitated, then reached for her hand. "Because the storm isn't over yet." Lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating them both, two souls caught between truth and ruin. In that fleeting flash, Cassian realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about headlines, family feuds, or business wars. Someone was pulling the strings, someone who wanted the Drell Empire to burn, and Elara was standing at the heart of the fire.
The storm had passed by morning, but inside the Drell mansion, a colder silence settled, one that no sunrise could warm. Elara sat on the edge of her bed, a faded photo trembling in her hands. She'd found it tucked inside an old ledger in the library's archives, a place Cassian said no one used anymore. In the photo, a young woman stood beside a man in a crisp suit, smiling, but not with joy, with restraint. The woman looked hauntingly familiar. Her mother. And the man beside her was Frederick Drell, Cassian's late father. Her breath caught. The resemblance was undeniable, and the date scrawled on the back sent a shiver through her spine. It was taken 1 year before she was born. The walls of her world began to tilt. Could it be? No. She pushed the thought away, too frightened to give it form. Just then, the door creaked open. Cassian stepped inside quietly, his face drawn and tired, as though he hadn't slept. "You've been in here for hours," he said softly. "What are you hiding?" Elara hesitated, clutching the photo tighter. "Cassian, did your father ever mention a woman named Helena Quinn?" He froze. The name hit him like a ghost from another life. "Helena?" he repeated, his voice low. "Yes, she worked here. My mother never liked her, said she was too close to him." Her heart began to pound. Close how? Cassian's jaw tightened. "My father had many secrets. When he died, Mother erased most of them." "Why?" "Because she was my mother." The air seemed to leave the room. Cassian's eyes widened, not in disgust, but in disbelief. "Elara, what are you saying?" "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't know my mother worked for your father. I didn't know she choked on the rest. What if I'm connected to all this in ways I can't understand?" He stepped forward, gripping her shoulders gently. "Stop. Whatever happened back then, it's not your fault. Do you hear me? You're not your mother." But even as he said it, doubt flickered in his eyes, a silent war between love and fear. That evening, Evelina called Cassian into her private study. The firelight cast long shadows across her face. "You've grown reckless," she said coldly. "You've brought a girl into this house who has your father's past written all over her." "Mother enough," Cassian snapped. "She's innocent." "Innocent?" Evelina's lips curled. "Her mother ruined our family once. Do you want history to repeat itself?" "She didn't ruin anything," he said sharply. "Father did." The slap came out of nowhere, sharp, final. Evelina's hand trembled as she lowered it. "You forget who you are speaking to."
Cassian's voice broke, low and pained. "No, Mother. You forget who I am." He turned and left before she could see the tears he refused to shed. Later that night, Elara wandered through the quiet hallways, the photos still burning in her palm. The air smelled faintly of cedar and old secrets. She passed the portrait gallery, rows of Drell ancestors staring down from their gilded frames, until one stopped her cold. A woman in a pearl gown, standing beside Frederick Drell, and in the background, almost hidden behind the curtain, her mother again, holding a clipboard, looking away. It wasn't just work, it was more. The painting captured it, that forbidden, fragile closeness that no one dared to name. "Miss Quinn?" came a soft voice behind her. It was Lyle, Cassian's assistant. He looked uneasy, holding a folder. "I thought you should see this." Inside were old correspondence letters. Most were mundane business exchanges, but one was different. Written in Frederick Drell's hand, it read, "If anything happens to me, protect her, protect the child. They must never know." Elara's heart stopped. The child. Was it her? She stumbled back to her room, clutching the letters, her thoughts spiraling. Everything she'd believed, every memory, every dream, felt like it was collapsing into dust. Outside her window, the rain had started again. But this time it wasn't a storm of nature. It was a storm of truth, one that could tear everything apart. And somewhere deep inside, Elara felt it. This wasn't just a love story anymore. It was a legacy, and she was at the center of it.
The next morning, sunlight spilled across the marble floors like gold trying to heal a wound. But the mansion still felt hollow, like it was holding its breath. Cassian hadn't slept. He'd spent the night pacing his study, haunted by Elara's words. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, frightened, honest, trembling. And every time he tried to convince himself it was coincidence, the photos she'd shown him shattered that fragile denial. He'd seen it. Her mother,
Helena Quinn standing beside his father. The same woman his mother had banished from their lives decades ago. When Lyle knocked that morning, Cassian already knew this wasn't a day he could escape. "Sir," Lyle said quietly, holding another folder, "you asked for the old estate records." Cassian took them wordlessly. Each page felt heavier than paper should, as if the ink itself carried the weight of ghosts. He flipped through letters, receipts, private memos. Then he found it. A trust fund. Created 19 years ago. Recipient, HQ. For the welfare of the child. Signed by Frederick Drell. Cassian's throat tightened. He whispered the words under his breath like a curse. The child. He didn't need to read more. The math was exact. The timeline perfect. If this was true, Elara wasn't just Helena's daughter. She was his father's daughter. He sat there for a long time, frozen. The morning light shifted across his desk, and with it came memories. His father's distance, his mother's bitterness, the constant tension that filled the house. Now it made sense. His father hadn't just betrayed his wife. He'd left behind a second family, a shadow child the world never acknowledged. And Cassian, the heir, the empire's face, had fallen in love with her. By the time Elara entered his office that afternoon, Cassian's world had already begun to crumble. His expression was pale, unreadable. "We need to talk," he said, voice. She froze at the door. "Cassian, what's wrong?" He looked at her for a long moment, then set the folder on the desk. "I found the papers, the trust fund, your mother's name, my father's signature." The color drained from her face. "No!" Sheets throat. "It's true," he said, his voice cracking despite his effort to stay composed. "You're his daughter. That makes you—" He couldn't finish. The word felt like poison on his tongue. Elara's knees gave out, and she sank into a chair. "No, this—" "Cassian, please. I wish it wasn't. I wish to God it wasn't." Tears blurred her vision. "Then what does that make us? What we felt?" And sheathed. "What we have?"
He turned away sharply, jaw clenched. Something that never should have happened. The silence that followed was unbearable. The air between them felt like glass, fragile, cutting. Finally, Elara whispered, "You think I knew?" He shook his head. "No, but it doesn't change what we are." She rose slowly, voice trembling but fierce. "What we are is two people who didn't ask for this. Your father's sins aren't ours." Cassian's chest heaved. He wanted to agree. He wanted to cross the room, hold her, tell her they'd survive this, but reason clawed at him, cold and relentless. "Elara," he said softly, "if anyone finds out, it will destroy you, destroy everything." "Then let them," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm done living in the shadow of your family's secrets." That night, Evelina found him sitting alone in the dark. "You know now, don't you?" she said quietly. He didn't answer. "I warned your father," she continued, voice brittle. "I told him his mistakes would come back, and now they have." He rose abruptly, anger flashing in his eyes. "You knew?" she said. "I suspected. Helena was a kind woman, too kind. He adored her. When I found out she was pregnant, I paid her to disappear, for everyone's sake." He stared at her in disbelief. "You paid her off to protect your pride?" Evelina's voice trembled. "I did it to protect you." "No," Cassian whispered bitterly. "You did it to protect the name, and now that name is a curse." He left before she could stop him. Outside, Elara stood beneath the mansion's archway, suitcase in hand.
The rain had started again, steady and mournful. She turned when she heard footsteps. Cassian stood there, soaked, breathing hard. "You're leaving?" She nodded weakly. "What else is there to stay for?" He stepped closer, his hand trembling as it reached for hers but stopped halfway. "I don't know how to fix this," he whispered. "Then maybe it's not ours to fix. Maybe the only way to heal this family is apart." Her words broke him more than any truth had. He watched as she stepped into the rain, her figure fading like a dream dissolving in the morning light. For the first time in his life, Cassian Armand, the unshakable CEO, fell to his knees. And outside, the storm roared on.
The morning broke too quietly for a house that had just lost its light. The mansion, usually alive with the hum of staff and the rhythm of routine, stood still, air heavy, curtains drawn as if the walls themselves were mourning. Cassian hadn't slept. He sat in his study, staring at the rain streaking the glass, replaying every word, every moment with Elara. Her laughter in the café, her soft defiance when he first tried to push her away, the way she'd touched his face the night before she vanished, whispering, "You deserve to be loved, even if you don't believe it yet." Her words echoed like ghosts in his head. And now, she was gone, vanished without a trace. The twins asked for her at breakfast, tiny voices that made his throat tighten. He told them she was away, but children felt truth long before they could name it. Arlen clutched her drawing, whispering, "She said she'd come back." Cassian couldn't answer. The ache in his chest was a storm he couldn't contain. Lyle entered quietly, holding an envelope. His face was pale. "This was found in Elara's quarters, sir. Addressed to you." Cassian's pulse spiked. He took it. The familiar looping handwriting tightened his breath. He broke the seal with trembling hands. "Cassian, if you're reading this, I didn't leave because I wanted to. There are things your grandmother never told you, things your father buried with his silence. I found a ledger in the old cellar, beneath the east wing. The truth about the orphanage fund, the experiments, the children who were bought, not born. The Arland legacy was built on more than business. It was built on blood, and I think you were meant to forget that. Don't look for me. Find the truth. And when you do, remember, I never feared you. I pitied the man they tried to make you become. Elara." The letter slipped from his hand. The fire in the hearth flickered like it too had heard something sacrilegious. "Experiments?" he whispered. Lyle hesitated. "Sir, there's something else," he said quietly. "Your grandmother ordered the basement sealed last week. She told maintenance it was for renovations." Cassian's eyes darkened. He stood, the exhaustion replaced by a sharp, focused rage. "Get the keys, now." Down in the east wing, dust choked the air. The cellar smelled of rust and mold, but beneath it, something else lingered, something sterile and wrong. They forced open a rusted metal door, and beyond it Cassian found what Elara had meant. Shelves of files, birth certificates, records stamped with the Arlen seal, dozens of children's names, donations that never reached the orphanages. One file bore a name he recognized: Mira Solon.
His vision blurred. Elara's mother, the woman who had died working for the Armand Foundation years ago. He scanned the page. Medical subject, biological research, project rebirth. His hands shook so violently the paper tore. "Dear God," he whispered, "we did this?" A voice came from behind him, soft but unwavering. "You didn't," said Evelina Armand. She was leaning on her cane, framed by the doorway. "But your father did, and I let him." Cassian turned, fury and disbelief colliding in his chest. "You knew?" Her eyes filled with tears, real, raw, unguarded. "Every empire costs something, Cassian.
Your father believed he could fix what nature broke, build perfection from pain. When I realized what he was doing, it was too late. We buried the evidence, paid the silence. But Elara, she found the ashes. He stepped closer, voice shaking. You let her suffer for your sins? You let her walk into this house not knowing? I let her in, Evelina interrupted softly, because I hoped she'd save what was left of us. Cassian's anger broke against the weight of her words. He looked around the cellar, at the ghosts, at the lies. All this time, he murmured, we called it legacy, but it's just ruin in disguise. Evelina reached out, trembling. You can still choose what it becomes, Cassian. End it, burn it, make it mean something again. He stared at her for a long, hollow moment, then tore the files from the shelves, one by one, feeding them into the flame of an old furnace until the air filled with smoke and the past turned to ash. When it was done, he turned to his grandmother, tears cutting lines through the soot on his face. If she comes back, he whispered, I'll tell her the truth myself. Evelina smiled faintly, her voice cracking. Then maybe love will repeat you. He closed his eyes as the flames roared higher, their light reflected in the glass, burning not for vengeance, but for forgiveness. And above them, as the rain began to fall again over the Armand estate, it felt almost like the sky was finally washing their name clean. Days turned into weeks, and the Armand mansion slowly began to breathe again. The ashes of the past still lingered, but the fire had changed everything. The files were gone, the lies had been burned, yet Cassian felt no peace, only the hollow ache of absence. He kept her letter in his pocket, folded so many times the edges had begun to tear. He'd stopped taking meetings. The empire ran without him, and for once, he didn't care. Every morning he found himself in the garden, her garden, where roses bloomed again under his quiet care. The soil still held traces of her touch, the faint memory of her laughter. The twins played near the fountain, their giggles a fragile reminder that life continued. But every sound, every petal in the breeze, made him wonder if she could somehow still feel him missing her. One evening, when the sun bled orange across the horizon, a figure appeared at the edge of the gate. The guard called out first, his tone uncertain. Cassian turned instinctively, and the world fell silent. She stood there, a small suitcase in her hand, the wind tugging at her hair. Elara, alive, changed. He froze where he stood, unsure if she was real or another cruel trick of memory. She smiled faintly, the same tired, kind smile he'd fallen in love with, and whispered, You kept the roses alive. He walked toward her slowly, afraid that if he moved too fast she might disappear. When he finally reached her, neither spoke for a long time. The sound of rain returned, gentle and familiar, like the night they'd first met. You found the truth, she said softly. Did you burn it? He nodded. Every page, but it doesn't erase what was done. It doesn't have to, she replied, looking past him at the estate glowing faintly through the mist. It just has to stop with you. He studied her face, the quiet strength there, the sorrow that matched his own. You left without a word. Because I thought loving you meant betraying her, my mother. Her voice broke on the word. But she would have wanted me to forgive, not vanish. Cassian reached out, hesitating before his hand touched hers. Then forgive me too, for not knowing sooner, for being part of it. She took a slow breath, then closed the space between them. You weren't part of it, she said gently. You were the ending.
The weight of it broke him. His forehead rested against hers, and for a long time neither spoke. Only the rain filled the silence, carrying away years of grief and guilt. From the veranda, Evelina watched them quietly, her wrinkled hands folded in her lap, her eyes bright with both pride and regret. She turned to Lyle beside her. "You see," she murmured, "he found what I couldn't, someone who makes him human again." Lyle nodded, his gaze lingering on the pair standing in the rain. "You think she'll stay this time?" Evelina smiled faintly. "If she's wise, she'll make him chase her first." Down in the garden, Cassian finally pulled back, brushing a tear from Elara's cheek. "Don't disappear again." "Not unless you give me a reason to," she teased gently. Then her expression softened. "Let me help fix what's left. The orphanage fund, the one still suffering because of what was done. We can rebuild it, together." Cassian nodded, his voice low but certain. "Then we start tomorrow. No more secrets." Elara smiled. "Then tonight, just remember we survived." He looked up at the house that had once symbolized everything he hated: power, legacy, control, and for the first time it felt like home. Not because of its walls, but because of the woman standing beside him. As lightning flashed beyond the hills, Cassian took her hand and they walked toward the light spilling from the mansion doors. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even peaceful. But it was real. And sometimes that was enough. The Armand Empire would never be what it once was, but perhaps with her, it could finally become what it was meant to be. The morning after her return, the Armand estate was quieter than it had ever been. No board meetings, no staff rushing through hallways, only the soft murmur of life returning in small, uncertain ways. Cassian stood at the balcony overlooking the gardens, watching sunlight stretch across the wet soil where Elara had once knelt. It felt different now, lighter, almost forgiving. Elara joined him, a cup of coffee in her hand, her hair still damp from the shower. For a moment, she said nothing, just stood beside him, letting the silence settle between them like something sacred. "It doesn't feel like the same place," she murmured finally. "That's because it isn't," Cassian said quietly. "It used to belong to my father, to his power. Now, it needs to belong to something better." He turned to face her fully. "You." She blinked, startled. "Me?" He nodded. "You. You saw what none of us could. You brought her, my grandmother, back to life in a way money couldn't. You made this house breathe again." Elara laughed softly, shaking her head. "Cassian, I'm not a miracle worker. I'm just me, a woman who got lucky enough to be hired by a stubborn old lady who believed in flowers." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe that's what we needed all along." As they spoke, Evelina watched from the terrace, wrapped in a shawl, her frail hands resting on the arm of her chair. She could hear their voices carried by the wind. Her eyes softened with relief, a rare expression on a woman who'd spent her life building empires out of fear. Later that day, Cassian gathered his board. For the first time in the company's history, he announced a reform that would shock every shareholder. "Armand Group will no longer hide from its past," he said, his tone steady. "Every cent made from the old pharmaceutical line will go to restoring the lives it harmed. This isn't charity, it's repayment." The room buzzed with disbelief, whispers rippling through the executives. One man stood up, defiant. "You'll bankrupt us for guilt?" Cassian's eyes hardened. "No," he said. "I'll save us through conscience." Evelina's cane struck the floor softly as she entered, her gaze commanding silence. "He speaks for me," she said, her voice weak but firm. "And if you doubt his decision, remember who built this name to begin with." The argument died instantly. Cassian met her eyes, and for the first time in years saw pride, not pressure, in her expression. When the meeting ended, Elara waited for him in the lobby. She could tell by the exhaustion in his face that he'd done something irreversible. "How bad was it?" she asked. He exhaled, loosening his tie. "Half of them called me insane, the other half called me idealistic." She smiled. "Which one do you agree with?" He said both, a tired grin breaking through. That night, the twins came running into the living room, giggling as they carried something wrapped in a towel. "Papa, look what we found in the garden!" Inside the towel was a tiny kitten, drenched and shivering. Elara gasped and took it gently into her arms, drying it off. The kitten meowed weakly, curling into her warmth. Cassian watched the scene, the woman he loved, the children laughing, the storm fading outside, and something inside him unclenched. He knelt beside them, brushing a strand of hair from Elara's face. "Every promise I make from now on," he said quietly, "will be one I can keep." She looked at him, tears glinting. "Then start with this one." He tilted his head. "Which one?" "Don't let the darkness win again." He nodded. "Never again." Outside, the rain began to fall once more, softer this time. Not the kind that drowns, but the kind that washes away. That night, while the house slept, Cassian stood by the window watching the city glow. For the first time, he didn't feel trapped by legacy. He felt guided by it. The Armand Empire had always been about control, but from now on, it would stand for redemption. And somewhere behind him, Elara's voice whispered sleepily, "You kept your promise." He turned and smiled. Always. The storm finally ended. The morning, when it came, felt like forgiveness. The house was still when the morning call came. A nurse's trembling voice over the intercom said only 4 words, "It's Kime, Mr. Armand." Cassian froze. For a moment, he couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He had known this day was coming. The doctors had said her heart was fading, slowly but surely. But knowing never made it easier. He walked down the long hallway to Evelina's room, every step echoing like a heartbeat. The door was half open, and soft light spilled across the floor. Inside, the old woman lay surrounded by the scent of lavender and the faint hum of medical monitors. Her once fierce eyes were calm now, gentle, and her lips curved faintly when she saw him. "You came," she whispered. "Of course I did," he said, taking her hand, surprised at how light and fragile it felt. She chuckled softly, a sound that trembled but didn't break. "You sound just like your grandfather. He always said the same thing when I tried to send him away for work." Cassian's throat tightened. He wanted to say something, but the words caught. Evelina's gaze shifted to the window, where sunlight was breaking through the curtains. "It's beautiful today," she murmured. "I was afraid I'd leave on a storm." Elara stood quietly near the door, her hands clasped to her chest. The twins peeked in behind her, confused but silent, their eyes wide. Elara noticed them and motioned for them to come closer. "My little angels," she said as they climbed onto the bed. "Do you know why the sun comes back after it rains?" Lily shook her head. "Why?" "Because even the sky knows it has to let go of sadness, just for a little while, so we can see the light again." Elara covered her mouth, holding back tears. Cassian squeezed his grandmother's hand tighter. "There's something I need you to do for me," Evelina said, her eyes fixed on Cassian. "In my desk, there's a sealed envelope. Don't open it until after I'm gone. Promise me." He nodded, voice low. "I promise." She exhaled deeply, a faint smile returning. "You've become the man I prayed for, Cassian, the one I never thought this family could deserve." He bent closer, his voice breaking. You made me that man." Evelina's hand trembled as she reached for Elara's fingers and placed them over Cassian's. "Don't ever let go of this one. She'll be your light when you forget where home is." Elara's tears fell freely now. "I won't," she said softly. "I promise." The nurse moved closer, adjusting the blanket. Evelina's breathing slowed, then steadied, each one shallower than the last. Her eyes fluttered once more, looking at all of them. Her grandson, the woman who'd changed him, the children who'd made her believe in miracles again. And then, with a final, fragile breath, she whispered, "Now I can rest." The monitor went still. The room filled with silence, the kind that presses against your ribs and steals your words. Cassian didn't move. He just stared, tears slipping down his face in quiet disbelief. Elara gently wrapped her arms around him, pulling him close, the twins holding onto his leg as though trying to keep him from falling apart. Hours later, after the house had emptied of visitors and condolences, Cassian sat alone at Evelina's desk. His hands trembled as he opened the drawer and found the envelope, cream paper sealed with the Armand crest. Inside, there was a letter written in her elegant hand. "My dearest boy, if you're reading this, it means I've finally gone to meet your grandfather. Don't be sad. My life was full because I lived long enough to see you change the meaning of our name. The Armand Empire doesn't need heirs of blood. It needs heirs of heart. You found yours in Elara and in those children who see you not as a CEO, but as a father. That is your true legacy. Use what I leave you not to build higher walls, but longer tables. Feed the world, heal it, love it. That's all I ever wanted. With all my love, Grandmother." The letter trembled in his hands as tears fell onto the paper. He pressed it to his chest, unable to speak, only whispering, "I'll make you proud. I swear it." Outside, the wind rustled through the garden, the same one Elara had once saved, and for a brief moment he could almost hear Evelina's voice carried through it, soft and sure. "The sky always clears, my boy."
The following weeks passed in a blur of quiet grief and relentless purpose. The Armand mansion, once filled with Evelina's laughter and the sound of her cane tapping against marble floors, now echoed with absence. Cassian had always associated silence with power. Now it only felt hollow. But grief, in its strange way, sharpened him. One morning, Cassian walked into his office at Armand Group, his reflection in the glass towering over the city his grandmother had helped build. He didn't look like the same man who once lived for profit margins and boardroom wars. He looked human. Tired, yes, but alive. The board of directors was already seated when he entered. Men and women in tailored suits straightened their ties and adjusted their expressions, waiting for the next order, the next expansion plan. Instead, Cassian placed a small black folder on the table and said simply, "We're changing everything." Confused glances rippled through the room. He continued, voice calm but unwavering. "Effective immediately, the Armand Group will shift 40% of its capital reserves into a new branch, the Evelina Foundation. It'll fund hospitals, scholarships, women's shelters, and small business grants across the city. No publicity, no profit, just purpose." One executive stammered, "Sir, that would cut into our annual—" Cassian's gaze froze him mid-sentence. "We've made enough to last 10 lifetimes. Now we start earning something real. Our name back." Silence. Then, slowly, the room nodded. After the meeting, Cassian went home to find Elara in the garden with the twins. She was kneeling in the soil, showing them how to plant marigolds, Evelina's favorite flower.
The sight stopped him in his tracks. The sunlight glowed on her hair, the twins giggled as they patted the dirt, and for a fleeting moment, everything in him went still. Elara looked up and smiled. "Long day?" He nodded, slipping off his jacket and kneeling beside her. "I think I just shocked the entire board." She raised a brow. "That sounds like something your grandmother would be proud of." Cassian chuckled softly. "I hope so. I started a foundation in her name." Her smile faltered, replaced with something tender and teary. "Cassian, that's beautiful." She always said legacy wasn't about inheritance. It's about what you leave in people, not just for them. Lily, their curious little twin, looked up with bright eyes. "Daddy, what's a legacy?"
Cassian smiled faintly. "It's what people remember you for, after you're gone." The twins exchanged a glance. Then Arlo piped up. "Like Grandma's hugs?" Cassian's eyes softened. Exactly like that. That night, Cassian and Elara walked through the halls of the mansion, pausing at Evelina's portrait. Someone, maybe Elara, had placed a single white rose beneath it. The candlelight flickered across her painted smile. "She gave everything for this family," Elara whispered. Cassian took her hand. "And now it's our turn." Weeks turned into months. The Evelina Foundation began its work quietly, just as Cassian promised. Abandoned schools reopened. Orphaned children received scholarships under Evelina's name. Women fleeing abuse found shelter under roofs she'd inspired. Every brick, every document bore the seal of a family reborn from greed into grace. The media called it the Armand Redemption, but Cassian didn't care for the headlines. He cared only for the faces of the people they helped. One afternoon, while overseeing the opening of a children's library in a forgotten part of the city, Cassian watched Elara kneel beside a group of kids reading from a storybook as they listened with shining eyes. She looked up, meeting his gaze across the room. For a moment, their world shrank to that single look, quiet, steady, full of gratitude. That night, after tucking the twins into bed, Cassian stood on the balcony overlooking the glowing skyline. Elara joined him, slipping her arms around his waist. "She'd be proud of you," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "No, she'd be proud of us." Elara tilted her head, her voice gentle. "So what now, Mr. Armand?" Cassian turned to her, his eyes reflecting both the city lights and something deeper. Peace. "Now," he said softly, "we live the legacy." Below them the city shimmered, not with the cold gleam of wealth, but the warm, spreading light of change. Somewhere in that quiet, Cassian could almost feel Evelina's presence again, a whisper against the wind. "The sky always clears, my boy. Always." The morning sun poured through the wide glass windows of the Armand mansion, wrapping everything in a soft, golden warmth. Years had passed since Evelina's passing, but her presence still lingered in the quiet corners, in the scent of roses by the window, in the faint sound of piano keys echoing from the sitting room, in the laughter that now lived where silence once ruled. Cassian stood by the window of his study, hands in his pockets, watching the city his family had once ruled from shadows. The skyline glowed with the same intensity it always had, but now he saw more than profit. He saw people. Lives changed, hope rekindled, and for once in his life, that felt like enough. Behind him, light footsteps approached. "Daddy," Lily's voice called softly. She was taller now, her hair in a loose braid like her mother's. "She said you're not allowed to work today. It's family day." Cassian turned, smiling faintly. "Did she now?" "She said you've been working too hard again. And," she hesitated, lowering her voice, "we're visiting Grandma's garden." For a moment, Cassian didn't reply. Then, quietly, he said, "All right. Tell your mom I'll be right there." Down in the garden, Elara knelt among the marigolds and white roses, trimming stems with careful hands. Time had been kind to her, not because she was untouched by age, but because every year seemed to deepen her grace. When Cassian joined her, she looked up and smiled, the same soft smile that had changed his life all those years ago. "You didn't forget," she said. "I never do." Together they placed fresh flowers by Evelina's small memorial stone, carved simply with the words, "She taught us to love again." Cassian knelt, brushing a fallen petal from the engraving. "You were right, grandmother. The family needed love again. You just forgot to mention how hard it would be." Elara placed a hand on his shoulder. "But you did it," she said softly. "You rebuilt what she dreamed of." He turned to her, eyes glinting with quiet warmth. "No, we did." From behind them, the twins' laughter broke the solemn stillness. Arlo was chasing a butterfly, while Lily tried to scold him for stepping on the flowers. Cassian couldn't help but smile. "They're growing fast." "Too fast," Elara said. "Sometimes I wish I could slow time down. Just for a moment." He took her hand gently. "Maybe we don't need to. Maybe all we have to do is remember every moment we get." Elara leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "And what do you think they'll remember about us?" Cassian looked toward the children, their joy, their innocence, the way they carried the light of generations before them, and he smiled. That love was never our weakness. It was our strength. As the day waned, the family sat beneath the great willow tree that Evelina had planted decades ago. The air smelled of mint and roses, just like it had the first day Elara, had come to the mansion. Lily pointed to the horizon. "Daddy, look! The sky looks like it's glowing."
Cassian followed her gaze. The sunset was breathtaking, a wash of amber and violet spreading across the city, painting the world in color. He remembered Evelina's final words, "The sky always clears, my boy." He smiled faintly. "It does," he whispered. That night, when the twins were asleep and the house was quiet, Cassian found himself once again on the balcony. The city stretched endlessly below, alive and peaceful. He took out an old photograph, Evelina holding him as a child, both smiling under the same sunset. "Thank you," he said into the wind. Elara appeared in the doorway, her silhouette framed by soft light. "Talking to her again?" "Always." She walked to him, her hand finding his. Together they looked out over the glowing skyline, a world healed by love, built on forgiveness. As the stars emerged, Cassian whispered, "Do you ever think about how it all began?" Elara smiled. "A rainstorm, a café, 2 children who saw something we didn't. And a woman," he added softly, "who taught me that not everything priceless comes with a cost." Elara leaned in, her voice barely above a breath. "She'd be proud of you, Cassian Armand." He turned to her with a look that carried years of loss, love, and rebirth, and whispered, "No, she'd be proud of us." The night wind swept through the garden, carrying the scent of roses into the stars, and somewhere, if one listened closely enough, there was laughter, faint, warm, familiar, as though the past itself had found peace. Because love had not ended, it had simply changed form, living on in every heartbeat, every bloom, every generation yet to come.